Picture a dinosaur right now. Go ahead, actually do it. Whatever showed up in your head just now probably didn't come from a museum or a textbook. It came from a movie. And here's the uncomfortable part. A lot of what you're picturing has been scientifically outdated for years, and nobody ever went back and updated the image sitting in your head. Here's the assumption almost everyone walks around with. Dinosaur movies are basically documentaries with better special effects, close enough to reality that it doesn't really matter. But that's not true, and it hasn't been true for a long time. Some of the most iconic dinosaur moments in film history aren't simplified science, they're invented outright. So let's go through exactly what Hollywood got wrong, one piece at a time. Let's start with the sound. There's a roar you've heard in almost every dinosaur movie made in the last 30 years. Deep, guttural, terrifying. It's become the default. This is a predator sound in pop culture. Here's the problem. Nobody has ever heard a real dinosaur roar, obviously, but paleontologists can still make educated guesses based on anatomy, and those guesses point somewhere completely different. Large theropods likely didn't have the vocal anatomy for a mammal-style roar at all. Based on their closest living relatives, birds and crocodilians, researchers think the real sound was probably closer to a deep, resonant boom or a low hiss, something closer to what an ostrich or an alligator produces, not a lion. The terrifying movie roar isn't a simplification, it's closer to fiction. Now let's talk about the claws. In several famous movie scenes, a mid-sized predatory dinosaur uses an oversized curved claw on its hand to slash at prey, gripping and slicing with terrifying precision. It's a great visual. It's also almost completely backwards. That claw was real, but researchers now believe it was located on the foot, not the hand, and evidence suggests it was likely used for pinning prey down with body weight rather than slashing in a fast combat motion. The dramatic hand swipe you've seen in movies moves the weapon to the wrong limb entirely. Here's another one that surprises people almost every time. The scaly reptilian skin you picture on most predatory dinosaurs in movies is very likely wrong for an enormous number of species. Starting in the 1990s and accelerating hard in the 2000s, paleontologists began finding fossil evidence of feathers on dinosaur species previously assumed to be fully scaled, including some very close relatives of the most famous movie predators. This wasn't a fringe theory. It's now considered mainstream science. Movies simply haven't caught up because a feathered predator reads as less frightening on screen than a scaled one, so the visual choice stuck around long after the science moved on. Think about that for a second. An entire generation's mental image of these animals may be shaped less by evidence and more by what looked scarier in a trailer. Let's talk about speed next. Movies love a dinosaur that can outrun a moving vehicle. It's a great action beat. It's also almost certainly not accurate for the specific dinosaur most famous for that exact scene. Based on leg proportions and bone structure, researchers estimate that dinosaurs' real top speed was likely closer to a fast human sprinter than a car, nowhere near fast enough for the chase sequence audiences remember most vividly. The moment burned into millions of people's memory, as realistic is one of the least realistic parts of the entire film. Here's one that's less about visuals and more about behavior. Movies love a scene where a predator supposedly can't detect a person as long as they stand perfectly still, because its vision is based on movement. It's a tense, memorable scare tactic. It's also almost entirely made up. There's no solid anatomical basis for that specific rule in any known predatory dinosaur species. Their eyes, based on skull structure and socket positioning, appear to have been forward-facing with good depth perception, closer to a modern eagle or hawk than anything that hunts by motion detection alone. Standing still in front of one of these animals would not have made a person invisible. It was a screenwriting device, not a biological fact, and it's one of the most widely believed dinosaur myths that has almost no scientific grounding at all. And then there's the group hunting behavior. Movies frequently show certain mid-sized predators hunting in tightly coordinated packs, communicating and strategizing like wolves. It's a compelling idea, and it might even turn out to be partially true for some species, but direct fossil evidence for this kind of behavior in the specific dinosaurs most associated with it is thin. Some sites show multiple individuals died together, which could suggest group behavior, or could simply mean several animals were drawn to the same carcass or trap independently. Filmmakers picked the more dramatic interpretation and presented it as settled fact. Size gets exaggerated too, though not always in the direction people expect. Some dinosaurs shown in movies are scaled up well beyond their actual measurements for dramatic effect, but others get the opposite treatment. Several genuinely massive long-necked species, some of the largest land animals to ever exist, rarely get meaningful screen time at all, because a slow-moving plant eater doesn't create tension the way a predator chasing a jeep does. The movie version of how big dinosaurs got is shaped entirely by which sizes make for a better scene, not which sizes were most common or most extreme in the fossil record. Even the extinction event gets compressed for drama. Movies that touch on it tend to show a single, sudden, catastrophic moment, everything dying at once in one dramatic sequence. The reality was faster than most people assume in geological terms, but still not instantaneous in the way it's usually depicted. The immediate aftermath of the impact killed an enormous number of organisms within hours, but the broader collapse of ecosystems and the actual disappearance of the remaining dinosaur species played out over a longer window as food chains broke down and environments shifted. Compressing that into one clean, sudden moment is a storytelling choice, not a documented timeline. Here's what's wild about all of this. None of these corrections come from nitpicky internet arguments. They come from published, peer-reviewed research, often from the very same institutions that consulted on some of these movies in the first place. The scientists frequently know their own advice got overruled in favor of what looked better on screen. So why does this keep happening, film after film, decade after decade? Because a movie's job isn't to be a textbook, it's to make you feel something in a dark room for 2 hours. A booming, ambiguous animal call is less immediately terrifying than a mammalian roar. A feathered predator is less visually intimidating than a scaled one. A slow, methodical hunting behavior doesn't build tension the way a fast, coordinated chase does. Every single one of these choices makes sense as filmmaking. None of them make sense as science. And because these movies are often the very first exposure most people ever get to dinosaurs, especially as kids, the fictional version gets planted first and rarely gets replaced later. Here's the full picture. The roar most people associate with predatory dinosaurs likely never happened the way it sounds on screen. The claw most people picture slashing from the hand almost certainly belonged on the foot instead. The bare, scaled skin covering the most famous movie predators is now considered inaccurate for many related species that had feathers. The speed everyone remembers as terrifyingly fast was probably closer to a decent human sprinter. The motion-based vision rule that makes standing still feel safe has almost no scientific basis at all. The coordinated pack hunting behavior audiences find so believable has surprisingly thin, direct evidence behind it. Even the biggest species and the extinction event itself get reshaped to fit a 2-hour runtime instead of the actual fossil and geological record. None of this makes the movies bad. It just means they were never trying to be textbooks in the first place, and most of us never noticed the difference. So the next time you watch one of these movies, or picture a dinosaur in your head without even thinking about it, remember what you're actually picturing, not a documented fact, a 30-year-old creative decision that happened to look terrifying in a dark theater and stuck around a lot longer than the science it was based on. If you want to see the actual studies behind each of these corrections, they're linked down in the description.